Spoilers for Star Trek Discovery Series 3, which has been out for a while, but you know. Hello, Rick here, looking at the burn event in Star Trek Discovery, the behind the scenes but in-universe science that went into justifying it and seeing if it holds up. Spoilers, it kinda does, despite how weird it is for it to be generated by one screaming Kelpian. The burn was the event that swept across the Milky Way galaxy in 3069, one that rendered dilithium inert and caused the detonation of active warp cores that were utilising the mineral. It only affected refined dilithium, and once the burn passed, more ore was able to be processed and used to continue warp drive travel. However, not Starfleet nor any other galactic power could identify the cause of the event, and therefore was unable to say for certainty that it would not happen again. This resulted in 120 years of caution concerning the use of dilithium and a major shifting of the quadrant's landscape. Starfleet itself was heavily diminished, and without its arm, the Federation's influence began to wane, as it quite simply did not have enough ships nor manpower to cover its expansive territory. Well, we don't know how big it was at its height, but considering its rate of expansion, I reckon it probably had members in every quadrant by the 31st century. After the burn, planets began to withdraw officially, or simply assumed that the UFP had forgotten them under the strain of trying to hold everything together. It didn't collapse entirely though, and continued trying to provide what aid it could, although there were more plates than it could spin. This meant that there was ample opportunity for other powers to rise in the meantime, especially those who threw caution to the wind and continued to mine and refine dilithium, such as the Emerald Chain, which seems to be a second coming of the Orion Syndicate of old, allied with the Andorians. But enough about the shift in the players of Star Trek's power structure, let's look at the burn itself. Approaching the event, dilithium had been running out, as this mineral was the go-to warp reaction regulator for like 99% of warp drives, and yes, even Singularity Core vessels use it as part of their setup. So, amid numerous alternatives that forego dilithium crystals, there were many survey missions to locate new sources. In 3064, the Kelpian and Baul Alliance research vessel, a member of the UFP, locates a planet with an incredible amount of dilithium within the Verubin Nebula. However, that vessel crashed, and due to the interference their distress signal was distorted and never detected. This planet was designated Theta Zeta, and host to all sorts of nasty radiations from the nebula and the abundance of dilithium. Dilithium itself is a physical pinkish purple to red crystal, obviously, but the reason it is used in warp is because of its structure, which actually phases into subspace, acting as a sort of bridge in the subspace layers that Trek's warp drive needs to function. I should point out that dilithium does not generate a subspace field nor warp bubble, but this property plays a part in simply regulating the power flow and process. The crystals all resonate at a certain frequency and can even react with one another, even being destroyed by a cascading piezoelectric effect as seen in TNG's pen pals. So dilithium in large quantities seems to be easily sympathetic, for lack of a better word, with nearby dilithium. After 5 years, a Kelpian child, Sukal, witnesses the final member of the crew die, his mother, and cried out. This is where things get trippy. Sukal had become immune to the planet's radiations through chance mutation, but additionally, because of the high levels of dilithium present, a trait emerged that linked his physiology to Subspace 2 in a very minor way. The unlikelihood of this occurring seems to have been aided along by the fact that Sukal was also a polyploid, effectively a creature with multiple copies of DNA from its parents, which is used to explain the resilience to his genetic alterations. Polyploidy is a real phenomenon, and seen occasionally in plants, insects, and some amphibious creatures such as salamanders. Sukal's cry of grief, because of his mutated connection to subspace, at the same level as the surrounding dilithium, caused his scream to pass into subspace, and the dilithium all around Theta Zeta reacted. Things in subspace aren't limited to light speed, so his call propagated all throughout the planet, which itself would probably have added to the effect and then beyond. The subspace shockwave had the effect of temporarily separating the subspace component of dilithium from its normal matter. Not an issue in the natural, unrefined dilithium ore, as that simply reconnected after the wave passed it by, but the refined stuff in the cores of thousands of starships, as well as in their reserves, was fractured by this disassociation. Suddenly, warp cores were channeling energy from whatever source into a lump of rock that was doing nothing to regulate it. Only for an instant, but that was enough, causing core breaches across the board in ships that didn't react fast enough. The already refined dilithium was damaged by the wave. Some of it never regained its subspace connections, becoming inert, and some of it did, but at a far less effective level. So this was the burn. The jargon around how dilithium in subspace works is consistent with how it's been portrayed in the past, with a clarification that dilithium actually partially exists in subspace. Until the explanation of the burn, I don't think we heard that, but it would go a long way to explain just why dilithium was selected as the preferred component of warp drives. There are two other elements to address. The first is that Su'Kal just so happens to mutate in the exact right way to resonate with the subspace levels of dilithium, which may have been aided by his polyploidy, but that is a rarity within a rarity. Super unlikely, in my opinion, but that kinda helps the believability of the burn, because there are so many safety features and fallbacks for the use of dilithium. The frank absurdity of the level of coincidences to line up to cause this beggars belief, so how on earth could anyone prepare for that? The other thing is that there is no mention of how Su'Kal's scream had enough energy to pass through subspace. They explained how the wave emanated from him in subspace. Sure, it was not bound to the speed of light, but for the wave to cross most, if not all, the galaxy, I can only assume that the planet itself acted as an amplifier, the sheer quantity of dilithium causing a sort of sympathetic resonance that aided in the burn. But that is not clarified on screen nor behind the scenes, so that is a bit of speculation on my part, based on what we already knew of dilithium. Now, before we knew what the burn was, many fans, including myself, speculated it was an Omega molecule detonation, but in hindsight I can see why they didn't go with this, as Omega destroying subspace is pretty much irreversible unless you want to include the ability to make subspace again, and that's just opening a whole new can of worms. At least what we got is an avoidable thing that had no lasting damage like Omega would. So, thanks for watching this video on just how the burn happened according to the shows, and hey, at least now Su'Kal has been removed from the planet, Starfleet has access to a massive dilithium deposit, and the answer to the burn and the reassurance that nothing else will ever go wrong ever again. Oh. Well. I've been Rick, and I'll see you next time for another lore, theory, analysis, science fiction, oh you know I chat about nothing videos. Until then, thanks again, and goodbye. Wow.